Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jeff Landau, and not only a real estate agent for the last 20 years, I'm a son who lost his mother last month and went through everything that we are discussing today. So what considerations will you likely be faced with, or will your parents be faced with as you grow older? How do those factors relate to their living situation? So I'll be discussing the decisions that you'll be faced with as you or as your parents' situations relate to real estate, such as how long can you or your parents stay in the home, and what factors to consider. If or when you can't stay, what do you do with the home? Do you rent it or do you sell it? If the house needs to be repaired or updated to maximize the value, how do you handle that? Another item that I'll be covering are what are the timing considerations of when to do everything. First, how long can you or your parents stay in the home? Is staying in the home or aging in place an option? So maybe, staying in the home is an option. Maybe you need to consider some modifications to the home, such as adding handrails in the shower, in the bathrooms, maybe making doorways accessible for a walker or a wheelchair, or adding ramps either outside the house or inside the house. Is home care needed? So I'll be going over, we all have overlap, so I'll be going over a couple of the same things. Is home care needed? When is that home care needed? Who will provide the home care? Will it be a family member or family members? Will you be getting outside help? Will you be getting an agency licensed, like Kalila mentioned, or will you go the unlicensed route? What are the risks of unlicensed? Paying somebody cash versus paying by W-2, that was covered. What if somebody calls in sick? What if somebody goes on vacation? How does your parent get coverage? What if there's a workers' comp claim? So those are some of the things to consider when you're thinking about in-home care and how, what to be looking for. How often would the in-home care be needed? What kind of coverage is needed? Do you need somebody during the day? Do you need 24-hour care? Do you have somebody during the weekend at mealtime? As we age, we sometimes lose our capacities, and for the parents to live safely, and for the children to have the peace of mind that their parents will be living safely. What services would the parent need? There's something called activities of daily living. There's a long list of those. What help does the parent need now? What might they need in the future? How will that be addressed? Even something Tammy mentioned it in the chat, the parent's ability to socialize when you have in-home care. I have my family has firsthand experience with that. My sisters and I live in the LA and Ventura area. My mom was living in Leisure Village in Orange County. We didn't know any better. We were saving money, and we had unlicensed care. We had one caregiver, and we did not have 24-hour care. We were taking a ton of risk without knowing it at the time. My mom's only socializing, she used to enjoy all the benefits of Leisure Village, the clubs and dinners with friends and all the different things. And now it turned out at that time, her social network was the paid caregiver. And then one day the caregiver was leaving. My mom walked her to the gate because my mom was a nice woman. Caregiver left. My mom had a courtyard. She turned down. She liked to keep things clean. She bent down for something and fell. Fortunately, did not get hurt at all. She was on the ground and she was too weak to get up. And conveniently, she left her cell phone and the life alert in the house. So what did she do? She laid on the pavement until 9 o'clock the next morning when the caregiver came back. That was our signal that we needed to change things up. So you need to think about what might your sign be. So let's move along. What if the decision has been made? What if either, the family has made the decision for the parent to move out of the house? What do you do with the house? So, does a family member move into it? Maybe there's a family member living there and the family member needs to leave. That could be a very difficult conversation to have. Other options are either to sell the home or to rent the home. If, from a rental standpoint, the family just may not be comfortable giving the house up yet. You may want to consider renting out the house, and it would be natural to think, well, let's just rent it out short term in case our parent needs to move back in. But getting a short-term rental is very difficult because tenants typically don't want something short-term, and they're nervous about somebody needing to sell the house. So they're looking for stable ownership and the likelihood of staying there a long time. So renting out the home short-term is possible. It's not really a viable option to plan on. And then from the opposite standpoint, what if the parent does have to move back in? And you can't because you're legally obligated to let the tenant stay. So it makes renting complicated. It's definitely an option. It's complicated. Does it make financial sense to rent the house out? Can you afford the next steps for the parent while renting the house out? You can certainly, it's relatively easy to estimate what your monthly positive cash flow would be. So you can see, is that cash flow going to help with what the parents' next steps are? How do you handle repair and maintenance to the house? That'll come up. How do you handle finding a tenant, screening a tenant, collecting rent? Do you manage that yourself as a family? Does somebody live close by? Does somebody have the time to manage that? Do they have the expertise to manage that? Or you could always hire a property manager to help with that. If it's in the family's best interest to sell the home, the benefits of selling is it removes any real estate market risk. Where will the market be going? There's probably a lot of concern with people on this call right now. The Fed raised rates again this morning. What's going to happen to the real estate market? It doesn't necessarily mean that the market's going to go down or go down a lot, but it depends upon the risk tolerance of the family and the financial situation of the family and the parents. A positive of selling is that you'll realize the net sales proceeds. You'll get a chunk of change when the sale closes. You get that in the bank. Now you have something to plan with. It removes any kind of timing concerns, as I discussed earlier. If there's a tenant that has negative implications from a timing standpoint. What if it's a weak real estate market? If interest rates go up and things slow down, prices go down, today what things are, you don't know what's going to happen in the future. Whether you're going to be renting or selling the house, then you have different considerations for what you do to the home from a preparation standpoint. Whether you're getting it ready to rent or sell, it definitely takes time. It's a time-consuming process. What work do you do? Where is money best invested in the house? If work needs to be done, who's going to do the work? What material should be used? High grade, low grade, medium grade? Who's going to manage the process? How do you pay for it? This makes me think of a story, which is really like a driving force in my business. I met a man named Fred. Fred's wife had dementia. They were living in a 2-story home. He was concerned for her safety because the bedrooms were upstairs. There was a lot of deferred maintenance at the house also. So Fred had concern for his wife's safety. And not only did they have those concerns, Fred had a son in Idaho, and they wanted to move to be with the son as they were aging. They were in their 80s. And when I inquired about Fred about selling the house, he said that there was too much work to do. He felt that he would be leaving a lot of equity, a lot of money on the table if he sold the house as it was and not fixing it up so he could benefit from that. So he decided not to sell the house. And I found out a few years later, Fred died. And he lived in a house he wasn't comfortable with anymore, in a situation for his wife that they weren't comfortable with anymore, all because he didn't feel he could maximize the value. And you can probably tell that story really, really impacted me. It left me with some regret that I couldn't solve their situation. And this addresses what somebody can do if their house does need work. And this is going to be a little self-serving, but I do have a service to help prepare somebody's home. I call it pre-modeling, where I can help them get the home ready for sale as opposed to selling as is, so they can get the equity and they can get the extra money for the home instead of the buyer benefiting from a lower sale price. And this worked beautifully. I had a client, Gisette. She was living in Leisure Village in Camarillo. Her son, Tony, lived in Washington, so he was not able to help her do anything physically with the house. She moved into Belmont Village in Thousand Oaks. She wasn't ready to sell the house. She wanted to move in because she wasn't sure what assisted living was going to be like. Is it going to be like the nursing homes from the 70s, or is it going to be a cruise ship on land? And months later, she loved living there. She was ready to talk about selling the home. And her home needed work in order for her to maximize the value. So when I got engaged, where we started the process was determining what work needs to be done, where is money best spent, what what needed to be. She needed everything. She needed a brand new kitchen. She needed two new bathrooms. She needed new flooring, paint. She had a back patio which was falling apart with wires hanging around. It wasn't even safe being in there, and she needed a fence in the backyard. We were able to do all of that work on a fixed budget of $60,000, which we put the money in up front. We fixed the home up, and we ended up, getting it sold for her. We figured out the price as is, collaboratively with her and with Tony at the time. We figured the house was worth about $425, and again, we had the fixed budget of $60,000. We sold her house for $655,000. So she got the benefit after paying that back. She got the benefit of that extra money without having to do anything except give us the keys. And she got a lot of months of living expenses as opposed to a buyer benefiting from that. So the next thing that I want to talk about is timing. So you have to make sure to have the conversation. If you're the parent, have the conversation with the children. The children need to have that with the parent. You need to make sure that the parents are being heard, that they're making hopefully an autonomous decision, and that you're understanding what the parents' wishes are. When do you do it? Do you do it right away? Do you put the house up for sale or for rent as soon as the parent moves to where they're moving next? Or do you wait until the parent gets settled in and is comfortable doing it? Either way is right, but you need to have that conversation so the family understands what is in their next best interest. With my mom, when we sold her house, we were moving her. Kalila helped us find a great assisted living in Thousand Oaks. When I was driving my mom up after her home sold, I can picture it right now. We were in the car driving north on the 405, and she said, "I've made up my mind. This is going to work out great." So we were really lucky. We didn't wait. We sold the house and moved her into a really great place. Now, at that same place, my parents had a friend who needed to go to assisted living, and they sold their place. They moved the parents up to LA. And at the time, I thought, how cruel is that? The parents needed to move to LA to be closer to the kids. How could they do that to the parent when I didn't know if that was the parents' wishes or not? And having my mom moved up to where my sisters and I are, I totally understand that now. It made it a lot easier for us to visit her very often. So there's no right or wrong, just making sure that everybody talks about what is going to be best for the family. I'm going to finish up with something that Terry mentioned, and it's the importance of making sure that the house is in a trust. Now, I'm not an attorney. I'm not going to give any legal advice, though I can tell you whether your home is in a trust or not, it's a public record. I could look up anybody's home right now. It's public. It'll take me a couple seconds to see if it's in a trust or not. I get told consistently, maybe 30% of homes are in a trust. It's very, very important that your home is in a trust. So, with a trust, that, that'll answer the question, do you have the power to finish a transaction if there is a transaction to be done? What documents are needed? Are the documents created? Are the documents updated? What Terry does, Terry is not an estate crisis. She's an estate planner. And I don't mean that to be a joke. This takes planning. I just called somebody that I've been speaking with who over the years has been thinking of selling. His wife had a stroke, completely healthy, one day had a stroke. We don't know that these things are coming. I didn't ask him if he had the proper paperwork. That wasn't appropriate for me to ask, but just for something to think about. Somebody doesn't have to die in order to need the right paperwork. So the right paperwork is going to cover what your wishes are, how to distribute assets. It'll make things much smoother for the heirs, even though they could still fight over it. At least if it's written out, you're not letting the kids figure it out later and fight over it later. Proper healthcare documents. I'm going in for shoulder surgery soon. I made sure that I have my advanced healthcare directive and sending it to my doctor just in case something's needed.